All right, we are going to read part 17 today. So, give me just a minute to let people know I'm going to read. We are on part 3, chapter 2, which is very exciting because now we want to know what happens. So we've left off with everybody in the movie theater except for Ellen Carver, who is at the police station municipal building, sitting at the desk in the holding cells. Part 1. You had some downtime coming. You saddled up and you went camping, Steve said. What then? I spent 4 days in the coppers, fishing, taking pictures, photographies, what I do for fun. Great days. Then 3 nights ago I came back. Went right to my house, which is north of town. What brought you back? Steve asked. It wasn't bad weather on the way, was it? No, I had my little radio with me, and all I heard was fair and hot. All I heard too, Steve said. Then shit's a total mystery. This shit's a total mystery. I had a meeting scheduled with Alan Sims, the company comptroller, to summarize the switch over from Rainbirds to heads and emitters. He was flying in from Arizona. I was supposed to meet him at Hernando's hideaway at 9 o'clock, the morning before last. That's what we'd taken to calling the lab and the offices out there on the edge of town. Anyway, that's why I'm wearing this damn dress, because of the meeting and because Frank Geller told me that Sims didn't like women in jeans. I know everything was okay when I got back from my camping trip, because that's when Frank called me and told me to wear a dress to the meeting that night around 7. Who's Frank Geller? Steve asked. Chief mining engineer, Billingsley said, in charge of reopening the China pit. At least he was. He gave Audrey a questioning look. She nodded. Yes, he's dead. 3 nights ago, Marinville mused. Everything in Desperation was peachy 3 nights ago, at least as far as you know. That's right. But the next time I saw Frank, he was hung up on a hook, and one of his hands was gone. We saw him, Cynthia said, and shivered. We saw his hand, too, at the bottom of an aquarium. Before all that, during the night, I woke up at least twice. The first time I thought it was thunder. The second time it sounded like gunshots. I decided I'd been dreaming and went back to sleep. But that must be around the time he got started. Then when I got to the mining office, at first she said she hadn't sensed anything wrong. Certainly not from the fact that Brad Josephson wasn't at his desk. Brad never was, if he could help it. So she had gone out back to Hernando's hideaway, and there she had seen what Steve and Cynthia would come along and see themselves not long after. Bodies on hooks. Apparently, everyone who had come to the inn that morning, one of them, dressed in a string tie and dress boots, would have tickled the country and western singer, had been Alan Sims. He had come all the way from Phoenix to die in desperation. If what you say is right, she said to Steve, Entrogen must have gotten more of the mining people later on. I didn't count. I was too scared to even think of counting then. But there couldn't have been more than 7 when I was there. I froze. I might have blacked out for a little while. I can't say for sure. Then I heard gunshots. No question what they were that time. And someone screaming. Then there was more gunshots, and the screaming stopped. She went back to her car, not running, she said. She was afraid that panic would take her over if she started running, and then drove into town. She intended to report what she'd found to Jim Reed, or if Jim was out on county business, as he often was, to one of his deputies, Entrogen or Pearson. I didn't run to the car, and I didn't go speeding into town, but I was in shock just the same. I remember feeling around in the global compartment for my cigarettes, even though I haven't smoked in 5 years. Then I saw two people go running through the intersection, under the blinker light. They nodded. The town's news police car came roaring right after them. Entrogen was driving it, but I didn't know that then. There were 3 or 4 gunshots, and the people he was chasing were thrown onto the sidewalk. One right by the grocery store, and the other past it. There was blood, a lot. He never slowed, just went on through the intersection, heading west. And pretty soon, I heard some shots. I'm pretty sure I heard him yelling "Yee-haw" too. I wanted to help the people he'd shot if I could. I drove up a little way, parked, and got out of my car. That's probably what saved my life, getting out of my car. Because everything that moved, Entrogen killed it. Anyone, anything, everything. There were cars and trucks sitting dead in the street like toys, all zigzagged here and there, at least a dozen of them. There was an El Camino truck turned on its right. There was an El Camino truck turned on its side, up by the hardware store. Tommy Ortega's, I think. That truck was almost his girlfriend. I didn't see anything like that, Johnny said. The street was clear when he brought me in. Yeah, the son of a bitch keeps his room picked up. You have to give him that. He didn't want anyone wandering into town and wondering what had happened. That's what I think. He hasn't done much more than sweep the mess under the rug, but it'll hold for a while, especially with this goddamn storm. Which wasn't forecast? Steve said thoughtfully. Right, which wasn't forecast. What happened then? David asked. I ran up to the people he shot. One of them... to the mirror, or the window. We frosted it. Like what? Frost. Like the frost spray? Yeah. Want to see if it keeps the dogs from barking so much. I make them bark more because it's blurry. They can't see. Can you do me a favor? Can you do me a little favor? What? Can you heat this up? Yeah. Just a minute. Thank you, sweetie. One of them was Evelyn Schoenstack, the woman who runs the cut and curl and works part-time in the library. She was dead with her brains all over the sidewalk. Mary winced. Yeah. Audrey saw it and turned toward her. That's something else you need to remember. If he can see you and he decides to shoot you, you're gone. She passed her eyes over the rest of them, apparently wanting to be sure they didn't think she was joking or exaggerating. He's a dead shot. Accent on the dead. We'll keep it in mind, Steve said. The other one was a delivery guy. He was wearing a tasty khaki uniform. Entrogen got him in the head too, but he was still alive. She spoke with a calm Johnny recognized. He had seen it in Vietnam, in the aftermath of a half a dozen firefights. Ooh, where's mine? I thought you were getting donuts. That's why I said, where's mine? He had seen it in Vietnam, in the aftermath of half a dozen firefights. He'd seen it as a non-combatant, of course. There you go.
Dishwasher clean?
As far as I know, yeah. That's where my cup came from. It's nice and clean. He'd seen it as a non-combatant, of course. Notebook in one hand, pen in the other. Your tape recorder slung over his shoulder on a strap with a peace sign pinned to it. Watching and listening and taking notes and feeling like an outsider. Feeling jealous. The bitter thoughts which had crossed his mind then. Eunuch in the harem, piano player in the whorehouse, now struck him as insane. The year I was 12, my old man gave me a .22. Audrey Weiler said. The first thing I did was to go outside our house in Sedalia and shoot a jay. When I went over to it, it was still alive. Sorry. Thank you, sweetheart. It'll cool down while I sit and read. Give me just a second to be right back. Yeah, I hope not. And I went for a walk and I made him upset, so he caring about me. Alright, we're all good. Yeah.
I know it's like this. At least when you and Dad argue, it's not over the stuff that I consider so weird.
No.
Instead of like,
He had to go get me eye drops because we can't find them.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I thought they were.
So did we.
I thought they were in the bathroom.
Well, that's what started the commotion. Was me. I was so in pain.
Did you check in the closet where the other stuff was?
Not there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was me. I went for a walk. What, you don't like your own food? Oh. What, you don't like your own food? She's looking at me like, what? I'm just eating. Yo, hot coffee. Hot coffee.
Her bowl is empty.
Oh, no wonder. Hot coffee. You're going to spill it on me. Hi. Can I have my coffee now?
You want me to split the food?
Yeah, Phoebe's not eating it. Might as well.
Harley, come here.
I need some sugar. The first thing I did was to go outside the house in Sedalia and shoot a jay. When I went over to it, it was still alive, too. It was trembling all over, staring straight ahead, and its beak was opening and closing very slow. I've never in my whole life wanted so badly to take something back. I got down on my knees beside it and waited for it to be finished. It seemed that I owed it that much. It just went on trembling all over until it died. The tasty cack man was trembling like that. He was looking down the street past me, although there wasn't anybody there, and his forehead was covered with tiny beads of sweat. His head was all pushed out of shape, and there was white stuff on his shoulder. I had this crazy idea at first that it was styrofoam poppers, packing stuff people put in a box when they mailed something fragile. And then I saw it was bone chips from his skull. I don't want to hear any more of this, Ralph said abruptly. I don't blame you, Johnny said, but I think we need to know. Why don't you and your boy take a little walk around backstage? See what you can find. Ralph nodded, stood up, and took a step toward David. No, David said. We have to stay. Ralph looked at him uncertainly. David nodded. I'm sorry, but we do, he said. Ralph stood where he was for a moment longer, then sat down again. During this exchange, Johnny happened to look over at Audrey. She was staring at the boy with an expression that could have been fear or awe or both, as if she had never seen a creature quite like him. Then he thought of the crackers coming out of the bag like clowns out of the little car at the circus, and he wondered if any of them had ever seen a creature quite like David Carver. He thought of the transmission bars and Billingsley saying not even Houdini could have done it. because of the head. They were concentrating on the buzzards and spiders and coyotes, on rats that jumped out of stacks of tires, and houses that might be full of rattlesnakes. Most of all, they were concentrating on Entroden, who spoke in tongues and shot like Buffalo Bill. But what about David? Just what exactly was he? Go on, Audrey, Cynthia said. Only maybe you could, drop back to from R to PG-13? She lifted her chin in David's direction. Audrey looked at her vaguely for a moment, not seeming to understand. Then she gathered herself and continued. I was kneeling there, part two. I was kneeling there by the delivery guy, trying to think what I should do next. Stay with him or run and call someone. When there were more screams and gunshots up on Cotton Street, glass broke. There was a splintering sound, wood, and then a big clanging, banging sound, metal. The cruiser started to rev up. It seemed like that's all I've heard for 2 days, that cruiser revving. He peeled out, and then I could hear him coming my way. I only had a second to think, but I don't guess I would have done anything different even if I had longer. I ran. I wanted to get back to my car and drive away, but I didn't think there was time. I didn't think there was even time to get back around the corner out of sight. So I went into the grocery store. Wendy Worrell was lying dead by the cash register. Her dad, he's the butcher as well as the owner, was sitting in the little office area, shot in the head. His shirt was off. He must have been just changing into his whites when it happened. Hugh starts work early, Billingsley said. Lots earlier than the rest of the family. Oh, but Entrogen keeps coming back and checking, Audrey said. Her voice was light, conversational, hysterical. That's what makes him so dangerous. He keeps coming back and checking. He's crazy and he has no mercy. But he's also methodical. He's one sick puppy, though, Johnny said. When he brought me into town, he was on the verge of bleeding out. And that was 6 hours ago. If whatever's happening to him hasn't slowed down, he shrugged. Don't let him trick you, she almost whispered. Johnny understood what she was suggesting, knew from what he had seen with his own eyes that it was impossible. Knew also that telling her so would be the waste of breath. Go on, Steve said. What then? I tried to use the phone in Mr. Worrell's office. It was dead. I stayed in the back of the store for about a half an hour. The cruiser went by twice during that time, once on Main Street, then around in the back, probably on Mesquite or Cotton again. There were more gunshots. I went upstairs to where the Worrells live, thinking maybe the phone up there would still be alive. It wasn't. Neither was Mrs. Worrell or the boy, Mert, I think his name was. She was in the kitchen with her head in the sink and her throat cut. He was still in bed. The blood was everywhere. I stood in his doorway, looking in at his posters of rock musicians and basketball players, and outside I could hear the cruiser going by again, fast, accelerating. I went down the back way, and I didn't dare open the back door once I got there. I kept imagining him crouched down below the porch waiting for me. I mean, I'd just heard him go by, but I still kept imagining him waiting for me. I decided the best thing to do was wait for dark. Then I could drive away, maybe. You couldn't be sure, because he was just so unpredictable. He wasn't always on Main Street, and you couldn't always hear him, and you'd start thinking, well, maybe he's gone, headed for the hills, but then he'd be back, like a damn rabbit coming out of a magician's hat. But I couldn't stay in the store. The sound of the flies was driving me crazy, for one thing, and it was hot. I don't usually mind the heat. You can't mind it if you live in central Nevada, but I kept thinking I smelled them. So I waited until I heard him shooting somewhere over by the town garage. That's on Demont Street, about as far east as you can go before you run out of town. And then I left, stepped out of the market, and back onto the sidewalk. Was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Like being a soldier and stepping out into no man's land. At first I couldn't move at all. I just froze right where I was. I remember thinking that I had to walk. I couldn't run, because I'd panic if I did. but I had to walk. Except I couldn't. Couldn't. It was like being paralyzed. Then I heard him coming back. It was weird. As if he sensed me. Sensed someone, anyway. Moving around while his back was turned. Like he was playing a new kind of kids game. One where you got to murder the losers instead of just sending them back to the prisoner's base. Or something. The engine, it's so loud when it starts to rev. So powerful. So loud. Even when I'm not hearing it, I'm imagining I hear it. You know? It sounds kind of like a catamount getting like a wildcat in heat. That's what I heard coming toward me, and I still couldn't move. I could only stand there and listen to it getting closer. I thought about the tasty cack man, how he was shivering like the jay I'd shot when I was a kid, and that finally got me going. I went into the laundromat, threw myself down on the floor just as he went by. I heard some screaming north of town, but I didn't know what that was about because I couldn't look up. I couldn't get up. I must have lain there on that floor for almost 20 minutes. That's how bad I was. I can say I was way beyond scared by then, but I couldn't make you understand how weird it gets in your head when you're that way. I lay on the floor, looking at dust balls and mashed up cigarette butts, and thinking how you could tell this was a laundromat even down at the level I was, because of the smell, because of the butts, because of all the butts had lipstick on them. That doesn't even make sense. Because of the smell and because all of the butts had lipstick on them. Oh, I see. I lay there and I couldn't have moved even if I heard him coming up the sidewalk. I would have lain there until he had the barrel of the gun on the side of my head and... Don't, Mary said, wincing. Don't talk about it. But I can't stop thinking about it, she shouted, and something about that jagged on Johnny Marinville's ear has nothing else had said. She made a visible effort to get herself under control, then went on. What got me past that was the sound of people outside. I got up on my knees and crawled over to the door. I saw 4 people across the street by the owls. 2 were Mexican, the Escola boy who works on the cruiser up at the mine, and his girlfriend. I don't know her name, but she's got a blonde streak in her hair. Natural, I'm almost sure. And she's awfully pretty. Was awfully pretty. There was another woman, quite heavy. I'd never seen her before. The man with her I've seen playing pool with you and Buds, Tom. Flip Moran. You saw the flipper? She nodded. They were working their way up the other side of the street, trying cars, looking for keys. I thought about mine, and how we could all go together. I started to get up. They were passing the little alley over there, the one between the storefront where the Italian restaurant used to be, and the Broken Drum. An Entergen came roaring right out of the alley in his cruiser, like he'd been waiting for them. Probably he was waiting for them. He hit them all, and I think your friend Flip was the only one killed outright. The others just went skidding off to one side, like bowling pins when you miss a good hit. They kind of grabbed each other to keep from falling down. Then they ran. The Escola boy had his arm around his girlfriend. She was crying and holding her arm against her breast. It was broken. You could see it was. It looked like it had an extra joint in it above the elbow. The other woman had blood pouring down her face. When she heard an Entergen coming after them, that big, powerful engine, she spun around and held her hands up like she was a crossing guard or something. He was driving with his right hand and leaning out the window like a locomotive engineer. He shot her twice before he hit her with the car and ran her under. That was the first really good look I got at him. The first time I knew for sure who I was dealing with. She looked at them one by one, as if trying to measure the effect her words were having. He was grinning and laughing like a kid on his first visit to Disney World. Happy, happy. Part 3. Audrey had crouched there at the laundromat door, watching Entrogen chase the Escola boy and his girl north on Main Street with the cruiser. He caught them and ran them down as he had the other woman. It was easy to get them both at once, she said, because the boy was trying to help the girl. The two of them were running together. And when they were down, Entrogen had stopped, backed up, backed slowly over them. There had been no wind then, Audrey told him, and she had heard the sound of their bones snapping very clearly. Got out, walked over to them, knelt between them, put a bullet in the back of the girl's head, then took off the Escola boy's hat, which had stayed on through everything, and put a bullet in the back of his head. Then he put the hat back on him again, Audrey said. If I live through this, that's one thing I'll never forget, no matter how long I live. How he took the boy's hat off to shoot him and put it back on again. It was as if he was saying he understood how hard this was on them, and he wanted to be as considerate as possible. Entrogen stood up, turned in a circle, reloading as he did, seeming to look everywhere at once. Audrey said he was wearing a big, goony smile. Johnny knew that the kind she meant. He had seen it. It was a crazy way it seemed to him he had seen all of this in a dream or another life. It's just them old cosmic Vietnam blues again, he told himself. The way she described the cop reminded him of certain stoned troopers he had run with, and certain stories he had been told late at night. Whispered tales from grunts who had seen their own guys, do terrible, unspeakable things with that same look of immaculate good cheer on their faces. It's Vietnam, that's all. Coming at you like an acid flashback. All you need now to complete the circle is a transistor radio sticking out of someone's pocket playing People Are Strange or pictures of matchstick men. But was that all? A deeper part of him seemed to doubt the idea. That the part thought something else was going on here. Something which had little or nothing to do. Hi! How are you? Had nothing to do with the paltry memories of the novelist who had fed on war like a buzzard on carrion, and had subsequently produced exactly the sort of bad book such behavior probably warranted. All right, then. If it's not you, what is it? What did you do then? Steve asked her. Went back to the laundry office. I crawled, and when I got there, I crawled into the knee hole under the desk and curled up in there and went to sleep. I was very tired. Seeing all those things, all that death, it made me very tired. It was thin sleep. I kept hearing things. Gunshots, explosions, breaking glass, screams. I had no idea how much of it was real and how much of it was just in my mind. When I woke up, it was late afternoon. I was sore all over. At first I thought it had been a dream, that I might even still be camping. Then I opened my eyes and saw where I was, curled up under a desk, and I smelled bleach and laundry soap, and realized I had to pee worse than ever in my life. Also, both of my legs were asleep. I started wriggling out from under the desk, telling myself not to panic if I got a little stuck. And that was when I heard somebody come out front of the store, and I yanked myself back under the desk again. It was him. I knew it just by the way he walked. It was the sound of a man in boots. He goes, "Is anyone here?" And came up the aisle between the washers and dryers, like he was following my tracks. In a way, he was. It was my perfume. I hardly ever wear it, but putting on a dress made me think of it. Made me think it might make things go a little smoother at my meeting with Mr. Sims. She shrugged, maybe a little embarrassed. You know what they say about using the tools. Cynthia looked blank at this, but Mary nodded. It smells like opium, he says. Is it, miss? Is that what you're wearing? I didn't say anything, just curled up there in the knee hole with my arms wrapped around my head. He goes, "Why don't you come out? If you come out, I'll make it quick. If I have to find you, I'll make it slow. And I wanted to come out. That's how much he'd gotten to me, how much he'd scared me. I believed he knew for sure that I was still in there somewhere, and that he was going to follow the smell of my perfume to me like a bloodhound. And I wanted to get out from under the desk and go to him so he'd kill me quick. I wanted to go to him the way the people at Jonestown must have wanted to stand in line to get the Kool-Aid. Only I couldn't. I froze up again, and all I could do was lie there and think that I was going to die needing to pee. I saw the office chair. I pulled it out so I could get into the knee hole of the desk, and I thought, when he sees where the chair is, he'll know where I am. That was when he came into the office. While I was thinking that, "Is somebody here?" he asked. He goes, "Come on out. I won't hurt you. I just want to question you about what's going on." "We've got a big problem." Audrey began to tremble, as Johnny supposed she had trembled while she was hedgehogged in the knee hole of the desk, waiting for Entrogen to come the rest of the way into the room, find her, and kill her. Except she was smiling, too, the kind of smile you could hardly bring yourself to look at. That's how crazy he was. She clasped her shaking hands together in her lap. In one breath, he says that if I come out, he'll reward you by... He says that if you come out, he'll reward you by killing you quick. And the next he says he just wants to ask a few questions. Crazy. But I believed both things at once. So who's the crazy one, huh? Who's the craziest one? He came a couple steps into the room. I think it was a couple. Far enough for his shadow to fall over the desk and onto the other side where I was. I remember thinking that if his shadow had eyes, they'd be able to see me. He stood there a long time. I could hear him breathing. Then he said, "Fuck it," and left. A minute or so later, I heard the street door open and close. At first, I was sure it was a trick. In my mind's eye, I could see him just as clearly as I could see you guys now, opening the door and then closing it again, but still standing there on the inside next to the machine with the little packets of soap in it. Standing there with his gun out, waiting for me to move. And you know what? I went on thinking that even after he started roaring around the streets in his car again, looking for other people to murder, I think I'd be under there still, except I knew that if I didn't go to the bathroom, I was going to wet my pants. And I didn't want to do that. Haha, no way. If he was able to smell my perfume, he'd smell fresh urine even quicker. So I crawled out, went to the bathroom. I hobbled like a little lady, like an old lady, because my legs were still asleep, but I got there. And although she spoke for another 10 minutes or so, Johnny thought that was where Audrey Weiler's story essentially ended, with her hobbling into the office bathroom to take a leak. Her car was close by, and she had the keys in her dress pocket. But it might as well have been on the moon instead of Main Street, for all the good it was to do her. She'd gone back and forth several times between the office and the laundromat proper. Johnny didn't doubt for a moment the courage it must have taken to move around even that much. But she had gone no further. Her nerve wasn't just shot, it was shattered. When the gunshots and the maddening, ceaselessly revving engine stopped for a while, she could think about making a break for it, she said, but then she would imagine Entrogen catching her up to her, running her off the road, pulling her out of her car and shooting her in the head. Also, she told them, she had been convinced that help would arrive. Had to. Desperation was off the main road, yes, sure, but not that far off. And with the mining getting ready to reopen, people were always coming and going. Some people had to come into town, she said. She had seen a Federal Express panel truck about 5 that afternoon and a Wyckoff County Light and Power pickup around noon of the next day, yesterday. Both went by on Main Street. She had heard music coming from the pickup. She didn't hear Entrogen's cruiser that time. but 5 minutes or so after the pickup passed the laundromat, there were some gunshots and a man screaming, "Oh, don't," and the voice so high it could have been a girl's. After that, another endless night. Not wanting to stay, not quite daring to try and make a break for it, eating snacks from the machine that stood at the end of the dryers, drinking water from the basin in the bathroom. And the next day, with Etrigan still circling like a vulture. Then a new day. She hadn't been aware, she said, that he was bringing people into town and jugging them. By then, all she'd been able to think about were plans of getting away. None of them seemed quite good enough, and in a way, the laundromat had begun to feel like home, to feel safe. Etrigan had been in there once, had left, and hadn't returned. He must never return. I hung on the idea that he couldn't have gotten everyone, that there had to be others like me, who saw what was going on in time to get their heads down. Some would get out, they'd call the state police. I kept telling myself it was wiser, at least for the time being, to wait. Then the storm came, and I decided to try to use it for cover. I'd sneak back into the mining office. There's an ATV in the garage of the hideaway. Steve nodded. We saw it. Got a little cart filled with rock samples behind it. My idea was to unhook the gondola and drive northeast back to Highway 50. I could grab a compass out of the supply cabinet, so even if in the blow, I'd be okay. Of course, I knew I might go falling into a crevice or something, but that didn't seem like much of a risk, not after what I've seen. And I had to get out. 2 nights in a laundromat. Hey, you try it. I was getting ready to do it when you two came along. I damn near brained you, Steve said. Sorry about that. She smiled wanly, then looked around once more. And the rest you know, she said. I don't agree, Johnny Marinville thought. The throb in his nose was increasing again. He wanted to drink, and badly, since that would be madness. For him, anyway. He pulled the bottle of aspirin out of his pocket and took 2 with a sip of spring water. I don't think we know anything. Not yet, anyway. Part 4. Mary Jackson said, What do we do now? How do we get out of this mess? Do we even try, or do we wait to be rescued? For a long time, no one replied. Then Steve shifted in the chair he was sharing with Cynthia and said, We can't wait. Not for long, anyway. Why do you say that? Johnny asked. His voice was curiously gentle, as if he already knew the answer to the question. Because somebody should have gotten away, gotten to the phone outside of town, and pulled the plug on the murder machine. No one did, though. Even before the storm started, no one did. Something very powerful is happening here, and I think that counting on help from the outside may only get us killed. We have to count on each other, and we have to get out as soon as possible. That's what I believe. I'm not going without finding out what happened to my mom, David said. You can't think that way, son, Johnny said. Yes, I can. I am. No, Billingsley said. Something in his voice made David raise his head. Not with other lives at stake. Not when you're special the way you are. We need you, son. That's not fair, David almost whispered. No, Billingsley agreed. His lined face was stony. It ain't. Cynthia said, It won't do your mother any good if you, and the rest of us, die trying to find her, kiddo. On the other hand, if we get out of town, we could come back with help. Right, Ralph said. But he said it in a hollow, sick way. No, it's not right, David said. It's a crock of shit, that's what it is. David! The boy surveyed them, his face fierce with anger and sick with fright. None of you care about my mother. Not one of you. Not even you don't, Dad. Now that's untrue, Ralph said. And it's a cruel thing to say. Yeah, David said, but I think it's true, just the same. I know you love her, but I think you'd leave her because you believe she's already dead. He fixed his father with his gaze, and when Ralph looked down at his hands, tears oozing out of his swollen eyes, David switched to the veterinarian. And I'll tell you something, Mr. Billingsley. Just because I pray doesn't mean I'm a comic book wizard or something. Prayer's not magic. The only magic I know is a couple of card tricks that I usually mess up on anyway. David, Steve began, if we go away and come back, it'll be too late to save her. I know it will be. I know that. His words rang from the stage like an actor's speech, and then died away. Outside, the indifferent wind gusted. David, it's probably already too late, Johnny said. His voice was steady enough, but he couldn't quite look at the kid as he said it. Ralph sighed harshly. His son went to him, sat beside him, took his hand. Ralph's face was drawn with weariness and confusion. He looked older now. Steve turned to Audrey. You said you knew another way out? Yes. The big earthwork you see as you come into the town. Oh my God. Into town is the north face of the pit we've reopened. There's a road that goes up the side of it, over the top, and into the pit. There's another that goes back to Highway 50 west of here. It runs along Desperation Creek, which is a dry wash now. You know what I mean, Tom? He nodded. That road, Desperation Creek Road, starts at the motor pool. There are more ATVs there. The biggest only seats 4 safely. But we could hook up the empty gondola and the other 3 could ride in it. Steve, a 10-year veteran of load-ins, load-outs, snap decisions, and rapid getaways, often necessitated by the combination of 4-star hotels and rock band assholes, had been following her carefully. Okay, what I suggest is this. We'll wait until morning, get some rest, maybe even a little sleep. The storm might blow itself out by then. I think the wind has let up a little, Mary said. Maybe that's wishful thinking, but I really think it has. Even if it's still going, we can't get up to the motor pool, can't we? We can get up to the motor pool, can't we, Audrey? I'm sure we can. How far is it? 2 miles from the mining office, probably 1.5 miles from here. He nodded. And in daylight, we'll be able to see Entrogen. If we try to go at night in the storm, we can't count on that. We can't count on being able to see the wildlife either, Cynthia said. I'm talking about moving fast and armed, Steve said. If the storm plays out, we can head up to the embankment in my truck. 3 up front in the cab with me, 4 back in the box. If the weather is still bad, and I actually hope it will be, I think we should go on foot. We'll attract less attention that way. He might never know we're gone. I imagine the Escola boy and his friends were thinking about the same way when Collie ran him down, Billingsley said. They were headed north on Main Street, Johnny said. Exactly what Entrogen would have been looking for. We'll be going south toward the mine, at least initially, and leaving the area on a feeder road. Yeah, Steve said. And then bang, we're gone. He went over to David. The boy had left his father and was sitting on the edge of the stage, staring out over the tacky old theater seats, and squatted beside him. But we'll come back. You hear me, David? We'll come back for your mom, and for anyone else he's left alive. There's a rock-solid promise from me to you. David went on staring out over the seats. I don't know what to do, he said. I know I need to ask God to help me straighten out my head, but right now I'm so mad at him that I can't. Every time I try to compose my mind, that gets in the way. He let the cop take my mother. Why? Jesus, why? Do you know you did a miracle just a little while ago? Steve thought. He didn't say it. It might only make David's confusion and misery worse. After a moment, Steve got up and stood looking down at the boy, hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes troubled. Part 5. The cougar walked slowly down the alley, head lowered, ears flattened. She avoided the garbage cans and the pile of scrap lumber much more easily than the humans had done. She sat far better in the dark. Still, she paused at the end of the alley, a low, squalling growl rising from her throat. She didn't like this. One of them was strong, very strong. She could sense that one's force even through the brick flank of the building, pulsing like a glow. Still, there was no question of disobedience. The outsider, the one from the earth, was in a cougar's head, and it caught in her mind like a fish hook. That one spoke in a language of the uninformed, but the time before, when all animals except for men and the outsider were one. But she didn't like that sense of force, that glow. She glowed again, a rasp that rose and fell, coming more from her nostrils than her closed mouth. She slipped her head around the corner, winced at the blast of wind that ruffled her fur, and charged her nose with smells of Brom glass and Indian paintbrush and old booze and old brick. Even from here, she could smell the bitterness from the pit south of town. Ugh! The smell that had been there since they had charged the last half-dozen blast holes and reopened the bad place. The one the animals knew about, and the man had tried to forget. The wind died, and the cougar padded slowly down the path between the board fence and the rear of the theater. She stopped to sniff at the crates, spending more time on the one which had been overturned than on the ones that stood against the wall. There were many intermingled scents here. The last person who had stood on the overturned crate had just pushed it off the one still against the wall. The cougar could smell his hands, a different, sharper smell than the others. A skin smell, undressed somehow, tangy with sweat and oils. It belonged to a male in the prime of his life. She could also smell guns. Under other circumstances, that smell would have sent her running. But now, it doesn't matter. She would go where the old one sent her. She had no choice. The cougar sniffed the wall, then looked up at the window. It was unlocked. She could see it moving back and forth in the wind. Not much, because it was recessed, but enough for her to be sure it was open. She could get inside. It would be easy. The window would push in before her, giving way as man things sometimes did. No, the voice of the unformed said, you can't. An image flickered briefly in her mind. Shiny things. Man-drinkers. Sometimes smashed to bright fragments on the rocks when the men had done with them. When the men were done with them. She understood, in a way like a layperson may vaguely understand a complicated geography proof. Good Lord. It was as if carefully explained. In a way that a layperson may vaguely understand a complicated geometry proof, if it is carefully explained. That she would knock a number of these man-drinkers onto the floor if she tried to jump through the window. And she didn't know how that could be, but the voice in her head said it was, and that the others would hear them break. The cougar passed beneath the unlatched window like a dark eddy, caused to sniff at the fire door, which had been boarded shut, then came to the second window. This was the same height as the one with the man drinkers inside of it, and made of the same white glass, but it wasn't unlatched. It's the one you'll see, though, the voice in the cougar's head whispered. When I tell you it's time, that's the one you'll use. Yes, she thought. She might cut herself off on the glass of the window, as she had once put the pads on her feet on the faces of man-drinkers. Up the hills. Wait. Yes, she might cut herself on the glass in the window, as she had once cut the pads of her feet on the pieces of man-drinkers up the hills. But when the voice in her head told her she had time to come, she would jump in at the window. Once inside, she would continue to do what the voice told her. It wasn't the way things were supposed to be, but for now, it was the way things were. The cougar lay below the bolted man's room window, curled her tail around her, and waited for the voice of the thing from the pit, the voice of the outsider, the voice of talk. When it came, she would move until it did. She would lie here and listen to the voice of the wind and smell the bitterness that the bitterness it brought with it, like bad news from another world. Oh my God, I can't read today. My BPD is acting up really bad today, so that's probably why. I do apologize for the mess ups so much, but we are going on to chapter 3 later tonight. I need to get some Tylenol for my head and then write down a few things that I'm working on. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to kind of chill. Wait, what happened to 15? Something's not right. Oh, that's 15. I don't know why I saw it differently. That was really weird. Alright. Taking that one away. Wait, that's not right. Uh-oh. I might have made a boo. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. I was like, what the hell? I'm exporting my thing. I'm putting them on YouTube. Pretty cool, huh? We are a reading club. I read, you listen. Works. It works. Alright. I do apologize that this chapter was all kinds of messed up, but we'll be good to go. So I'm going to let you guys go, and I'm going to get some stuff done that I need to get done. I've got some writing to do. I'm going to write in here that we did 17 today. I can find today. Yes, there we are. Okay. So we did 17 this morning. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. What do we got? I got 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. We only got 26 sections, so 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. We might be able to finish Friday night. We'll have to wait and see. So if we finish Friday night, then, we can decide what we want to read next. If we want to read next, maybe we want to, maybe we don't. And that's okay. I am actually writing out little Bible stuffs. And it's a long list. And then I add to it. My rating sucks, but I keep dropping my pen. I lost my Steelers pen somewhere. Like, I have a Steelers pen. Can't find it anywhere. This is what I've been doing today. Before I went for my walk. Writing. Prayers. Yeah. That's what I'm doing today. And listening to YouTube. So, hopefully, y'all will have a good day. Have a great Sunday. we know they're talking about how they're going to leave. So we'll see what happens. Audrey's still telling her story. So we'll get on to chapter 4 or chapter 3. I think it's chapter 3. We'll get on to that. And we'll see what happens. So I hope you all have a good day. Thank you for following me. If you haven't, you're welcome to. And that way you can get notifications when I'm reading. Excuse me. Sorry. My walk is the reason that I was late today. So I needed to get out and walk. So, and I did. So you guys enjoy your day. And I will be seeing you again later. Bye. Love you guys.